Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jere B. I am the EntreMusician, and so is the brother who's sitting to my right. And I do mean ultimate EntreMusician. We're going to talk about all the wonderful things that Brother Glenn Douglas is he has his hand in like everything. But before we talk to him about that, we're going to talk about this. This is Vocal. As you know, all of our shows are sponsored by Vocal, the only beverage on the planet designed to soothe, refresh, and restore your voice. If you talk all day or sing all night, you definitely want to get to Vocal. That's drinkvocal.com, launching in just days now. They're just days away from their new launch, so drinkvocal.com. Now, oh my goodness, check this out. Glenn Douglas, as you know, had a band. Sound Doctrine came down every time we went, Baltimore, D.C., Delaware, Virginia, wherever we were, one name kept popping up, Glenn Douglas. What's happening, brother? How are you?
Man, everything is fantastic, man. Life is grand, man. Loving it.
You are the ultimate EntreMusician. I'm telling you, you have your hand in absolutely everything.
Well, you know, you have to keep busy, man. You have to keep busy. One thing for sure, you know, Dizzy Gillespie said it best. If I play my instrument for 1,000 years, my instrument will always surpass me. So there's always something new. There's always something new to learn. I'm hungry. I'm just hungry. I love it.
You sound like you're hungry, man. We've listened to your music for years, Phase 2, and just all of the wonderful things that you do, not only in the studio, but on stage. And you always sound hungry. That's for sure.
Hey, man. Hey, there's only 12 notes in music. All of them are right. They're only wrong when you don't know what you're doing with them.
Woo! Yeah, we got to write that one down.
You can use it.
I'll definitely make a note of that. That's for sure. Now, tell me about Glenn Douglas, man. You've played with just about everybody. I don't want to just sit here and jap you up. I really want to know who you are. How'd you get started in music? What's going on?
Well, it's kind of funny, man. I'd like to feel that I wasn't one of those musicians who came out the womb and I was playing a whole bunch of different instruments. But what I was that I heard music in my head when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I came up in that era where, you know, kids would come home from school and you just had to have a key. You know, you go in the house. So right. Nobody was home. So I used to, and my mother would kill me if she had known what I was used to do. I used to take aluminum foil, and it's where everybody else had G.I. Joes. I had aluminum foil musicians. And I would take the component set in different places in the house, and every day we would have a concert.
Wow.
So what ended up happening at some point in time, man, I started hearing music in my head that hadn't even come out yet. And when this music started coming out, I was like, wait a minute, man, I heard that when I was a kid, but I heard it in my head and I didn't know what I was listening to.
Understood.
So when my family moved to this area in Washington, D.C., we had a band that was practicing next door. And, you know, I had a little organ at home. I never played it. Honestly, I never played it. But all the kids in the neighborhood said, hey, man, let's start a band. I said, okay. I said, I got a little organ at home. Man, Jere, as soon as I put my hand on the keyboard, God said, this is what I want you to do. And you couldn't tear me. You had to tear me from it.
I understand.
You know, I would sit there and practice for hours and hours and hours. And at first, everything was done by ear. And then my mother said, if you're gonna do music, you're gonna have to learn it correctly. Mm-hmm. So, I started taking lessons, but I was always curious. And so I would go and buy all these music books. I didn't even know what I was looking at. I just buy them and I started reading and I started studying music theory. And all of a sudden it just started coming together, man. You know, the language of music started making sense to me.
Yes, sir. Now, how old were you in this first band that you were in?
Oh man, I was probably about 11, 12.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, we were playing in NCO clubs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not these snotty-nosed little kids running around in NCO clubs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I was making money back then, man. You know, I was a gigging musician back then. You know,
that's beautiful, man. I can dig that. We were talking before we got started here about Chris Rhodes, who's a well-known bass player down in Baltimore, DC area, and we started out the same way, man. We were 5th grade, he was 6th grade, and you know, like you said, that was it. We knew this was it for life.
Yeah, you know, and it saved me. Actually, yeah. I'll tell anybody, man.
Because, sure.
In my neighborhood, you know, it's a lot of drugs and things that were happening, you know, and music kept me focused and kept me away from a lot of that stuff, man. You know, because my parents always knew he was either out with the buddies playing football out in the alley. We didn't have a football field. We had an alley.
Understood.
So I was either out in the alley, I was either practicing, or we were having band rehearsal, or out gigging. Now, yes, the beautiful thing about Washington, D.C., man, was back when I was a teenager, Marion Barry had created this program called Summer in the Parks. And basically what it was that any teenager that wanted a summer job, he made it possible for you to have a job.
Excellent.
So my summer job was playing in the band, every 2 or every 3 days, every 2 days, we would go to a different recreation center sponsored by the DC government.
Wow.
And perform. And we got paid for playing, but the days that we didn't perform, we rehearsed and we got paid for rehearsal.
Oh, well, there you go.
And as time went on, I eventually became Marion Barry's pianist. So whenever he would go out and do a speech, they would call me and say, "Hey, Glenn, we need you to go so-and-so place and just play for 20 minutes. And at that time, I was playing some jazz and playing classical music. So I would sit down and play. And when he walked in the door, I'd stop. When I finished, they hand me a check and I'm done.
That's excellent. Now, how old were you when this was going on?
I was about 16, 17 years old, man.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a blessing, but it's also your chops, though, and your dedication to your gift made room for you.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I was one of those, man, that practicing 6, 7, 8 hours a day was,
standard.
Yes, it was standard. I remember, man, my dad coming home, man, I'd be downstairs running scales and he'd be like, Kurt, can you play something else other than some scales?
All the while you're making them proud, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know, man. I know. But I got it. You got it. Okay, I got to switch gears. Let me play something else.
Oh, man. Well, I love your music. I appreciate the depth and the diversity that you bring to the table. It's not just one trick pony and it's the same song arranged 12 different ways. You really dig in, and I appreciate that. Now, your website is Glenn Douglas Music.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
With 2 N's on the Glenn, because for a while there I was looking at the 1 N Glenn.
No. Yeah. 2 N's, 1 S.
2 N's, 1 S. Now tell me about your first recording.
Actually, my first recording was called A Touch of the Hand. Mm-hmm. And it was more of an experimental thing because, it came about from this thing of people were so much into, hey, look, we got to do a project that's going to make you money. You got to do a project. Well, I decided to do an artistic project.
Blessings to you, bro.
And the first song was Touch of the Hand. It's about 15 minutes long. but the song went through these different movements, and it just and I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I think a couple of babies came out of that.
Understood. I can dig it.
Yeah. People told me, man, I put Touch of the Hand on underneath the fireplace. I don't know, dude.
We named him after you.
And it was another song on there called Flight of the Big Black Bird. And this is right around the time when the stealth bomber first came out. And I was just it was something about the whole concept of this plane, the way it was shaped, and the fact that it could fly and you could not detect it on radar. So I wrote this song. It's called Flight of the Big Black Bird, and it's kind of had this moving thing to it, man.
Yeah.
But that was the first project. The second project was called Sketches. Because all of the tunes basically came from the idea of, just like an artist takes a sketch, will sketch something out first and then build around it.
Yeah.
And nurture it and have it grow. Well, that's what this whole thing was about. It was sketches of tunes that eventually, man, as I started feeding these tunes, man, these tunes came to life, man. It was a very beautiful project.
Wow. And so now, who are the musicians that are you? I would imagine A Touch of the Hand was completely solo, or did you invite other soloists and musicians in as well?
Touch of the Hand, I had Jeffrey Neal on drums. I also had Romero Wyatt on percussion. It was Larry Melton on bass. Tracy Cutler played sax. Let me see. Touch of the Flight of the Big Black Bird was almost more of me just doing MIDI stuff. You know. Yeah, man. It was a hot project, man. Hot project.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
But my second project was called Sketches, and Sketches. I used a variety of musicians, and I chose musicians based on their sound instead of saying, hey, man, I'd like for you to come play on my project.
Sure.
I really wanted to have it focused that I wanted to have people that had a particular sound that I was looking for. I think that sometimes, we get away from that.
True.
We get away from it. We say, hey, man, sometimes folks try to get the hottest musicians out there to play on their projects.
Sure.
I decided to go on a different route. I decided to go with who's giving me the sound that I'm looking for. That's right.
Well, different is fantastic. When you are not doing the cookie cutter thing, like you said, with the Touch of the Hand, when people are saying, hey, this is where you need to be here in order to get there. And you're just saying, yo, first of all, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, this is my gift, and this is how I'm expressing it. More power to you.
Yeah. Didn't make any money, but it's okay.
You look like you're eating, though. You look like you're eating.
I got water. It's interesting because, just like in the smooth jazz vein, they started saying that, hey, look, if you want to get recognized, you have to play a classic. You have to play someone else's song. And I was saying to people, I said, look, a classic was an original piece at one point. How about that?
I love it. Absolutely. We were told the same thing, and this is what you have to do. I mean, there's this guideline that you have to walk, and if you veer outside the lines, it's not going to go to radio. It's not going to go this. We're not going to do that. And you're looking at the amount of money that you don't have to spend. And you're making those things, because we did do a cover. We did, and that's the one that continues to rotate on radio. But the thing about it is, what happened when they made that? It wasn't a cover. It was an original tune. So I want to open my heart and give you, this is what God gave me, and I'm giving it to you. So we walked that line, and then we walked away from the line. And again, I have water too. It's somewhere sitting around here.
No, you got vocal.
I have vocal, yeah. Absolutely. Well, now tell me about the life, because I know you have the interviews that you do as well, Real Talk. But you know, tell me about the life as an EntreMusician from the perspective of Glenn Douglas.
Ooh, man. I just tell people, man, that being a musician, man, is we're different creatures. We really are. Most of us are, because we spend so much time trying to develop our craft and trying to develop what we're doing, and sometimes people don't quite understand that.
Sure.
And one other thing that people don't understand is that, you know, music is a language skill.
It is.
And it's just like learning how to speak English or trying to learn how to speak French, trying to learn. You have to practice these things. You have to work on it. You have to work on it. And with us as musicians, as we went in the beginning, when we come up, we learn to emulate other people. We take what other people are doing and say, oh yeah, that's the sound that I want, and we start working on that.
Sure.
But you really don't start becoming a true musician until you have developed your own sound. When somebody can hear something and they can say, it's Jere, I know that sound, I know that sound.
Right. That's right.
Then you're starting to speak the language of music. And I think with me, that's I'm still developing that sound, even though I feel that people know when they hear me, they say, oh, that's Glenn.
Sure.
But I have to increase my vocabulary.
I understand.
Yeah, I have to increase my vocabulary, and as I'm getting older, I didn't say getting old, getting older. No. Or let me say, as I'm ripening.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm finding is that, you know, my body changed. My body's starting to change, and as my body's starting to change, I have to adjust to that. To maintain what I've been doing, but also look and say, okay, what is this change that's taking place, and how am I going to deal with it? Because sometimes, man, you know, as you get older, all of a sudden, man, you start finding you don't play as fast as you used to play. However, your note choice has more feeling.
Yes, sir. I understand.
Yeah. So I hope I'm answering your question.
You are.
You know.
You are. But in addition to that, there's so many other things that you bring to the table, the musicianship being one of it, but you also have, I understand, a radio show or a podcast where you're talking with other musicians.
Yes.
Right? So tell us a little bit about that.
I have, it's called Musicians Real Talk.
Yes.
And Musicians Real Talk, I try to get life stories, musical life stories of musicians who are located in the Maryland, Virginia, and DC area. But not just musicians, but also people who are in the music industry. And the way it came about was that on my job, I'm a podcast sound engineer. I work for the Association for Financial Professionals. And we have a podcast. And just so happened, they sent me to Podcast Movement one year. And I walk in there, man, it's about 2,000-3,000 podcasters. And I'm like, wow, man. And as I'm starting to talk to people, I realize that people, if you have an interest, there's an audience. There's somebody out there that wants to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely.
So I decided that I was going to do a podcast on the musicians in DC, but it was going to be a thing where I was going to focus on certain situations or certain content. Things like how do you maintain being a full-time musician, musician-related injuries, and things like that.
Sure.
My very first podcast was Wes Bowles, upright bassist in DC. And he was telling me how when he was, he grew up in Nashville, and he was about 8 or 9 years old, selling newspapers. And he was selling newspapers in front of the Grand Ole Opry.
I see.
And he was selling newspapers to all those country stars. He said, all of them would come out and buy newspapers from him. Mm-hmm. So eventually they started taking him backstage. And so that he got a taste of being backstage and got a taste of music. Eventually, when he went to school, when he was in school, he took up music, and But what I found out was that his story had more meat than some content, than some special interest. Mm-hmm. The special interest would eventually become part of his life story, but his life story was what was important.
Absolutely.
So I changed my focus, and I started concentrating on people's life stories.
Yeah,
man, and I've gotten such powerful stories from this, man. I mean, it's just heartwarming stories.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is that I'm getting stories from the people in their original voice, in their voice. Sure. They are the ones telling the stories. Yeah. Because I'm sure where you are as where I'm in, a lot of the musicians that carried the torch for so long are transitioning.
Absolutely.
And their life stories, if no one got their life stories in their voice, it's gone with them.
Sure.
Well, I'm trying to change that. I want to get people's life stories in their voice, get a catalog, that the world is always there for the world to hear.
That's a beautiful thing, man, because in the last couple of weeks, I've been really digging on the music back through my library, through the Crusaders, Joe Sample, Wilton Felder, and all of them. And, Styx Hooper is the only one left, so it's like, wow, it would be real cool to get in touch with Styx and have him kind of relive what it was like to be in that incredible band, because the Crusaders really set the mark for Spyro Gyra and all of the, jazz to come. They really were the pioneers of that. So, yeah, you're right. They've all transitioned except for Stickman.
Yeah. And it's amazing that when you say that, because, when we think about this whole thing of smooth jazz, and I hear people, they to me, I tell people, I said, look, for me, the first smooth jazz artist was, what was the guy that played saxophone?
Grover Washington Jr.
Not Grover.
Not Grover?
Not Grover.
Teach me.
Guy who played for Motown.
Oh, you're talking about Junior Walker.
Junior Walker. Mm-hmm. To me, Junior Walker was the first one, because what he did was he took instrumental music and
played the melody.
Played it with R&B. Mm-hmm. That's what to me, that's all smooth jazz is. Mm-hmm. It's instrumental R&B music.
That's exactly right. I agree with you.
I can't say this, man. I was blessed to spend 3 years on the road with Walter Beasley. Mm-hmm. Learning experience. It was a great learning experience.
Yes, sir.
I learned a lot from him, especially about how to build a song, build a piece, and not overplaying, not underplaying. You just got to find that sweet spot. And from working with him, man, I learned a lot.
Yes, sir.
And I just can't say enough, man, about that experience, man. I mean, it was great, man.
Well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to have you back on, and then back on again, because that's for sure. Because one of the things that I want to do is I want to hear your life story, as you have taken the opportunity to gather from DC, Virginia, and Baltimore. You have a story as well. And so we want the EntreMusician to be the place where your story is told and archived, and then just retold.
Oh, man. Hey, man, yes. We have to do that. Definitely.
We will do it. Not have to. We will do it. But what we want to do is send people to the place where they can find the podcast, they can find your website and follow you wherever you are. And then we'll come back for another conversation with you. Is that okay?
Sounds great, man.
So tell everybody how to get in touch, how to contact, dialogue with Glenn Douglas.
Hey, you can reach me at www.glenndouglasmusic.com. That's all. That's my website. But on my website, you'll also see a link there for the podcast. So you can click on the link, and you can hear some of those wonderful stories that I've been talking about. And also, I have samples of my music up there, as well as my calendar and my bio, which I probably need to update because I'll say this: when you've worked with a lot of people, after a while, you just kind of said, "Look, I work."
Right. I work often.
I work often. Okay?
Absolutely. Wow. Well, I tell you what. So Glenn Douglas, and then what about the podcast? GlennDouglasMusic.com, and then the podcast.
Yeah, the podcast, you can reach the podcast right down the website.
Okay, so that's a one-stop Glenn Douglas shopping right there for all things Glenn Douglas, right?
That's right. That's
excellent.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much, man, for coming to join us. We will do this again, and then we'll do it again after that. Yes. And then we'll do it again after that. Just because.
Yeah, how about that, man? I have to get you on, so I can get your story, man.
Anytime. Anytime. Yeah. I'm grateful. When you go to the EntreMusician.com, you will see that Glenn Douglas is a part of our EntreMunity. We have 50 artists now that have really dialogued and signed on. So our heart is to create that dialogue and see what collaborations can come out of that. And so we'll do this over and over again to make sure that this community is really being built up. Thank you, Glenn, for all that you do. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for really contributing to this thing called music, man.
Thank you, man.
God's blessing upon you.
Hey, where can I get some of that vocal water, man?
It's dropping in days. Go to drinkvocal.com. It's dropping in days. I'm telling you, drinkvocal.com. Without fail, you're going to absolutely love it. I am Jere B. I am the EntreMusician. Glenn Douglas is an EntreMusician, and so are you. We'll see you again soon. God bless.
God bless.